What more exciting topics can you have other than the Articles of Confederation? I mean, really, one of those underappreciated, underrated documents from our American history for one reason only. It's because it was a failure. Let me tell you why. It's America's first constitution. It's not our current constitution because something happened, something changed. There was a need or a reason, and we need to explore those understandings. And in order to get those understandings, we need to do some deep investigation in class. But before we can do that, before we can learn the Constitution generally, we need to take a look at this document that defined who and what the United States was prior to 1787. So we're going to focus a little bit on the time between 1783, after the Treaty of Paris was signed. We're going to take a look at that document too, and then we're going to take a look at that time between that year, 1783, and 1787, because significant turmoil, significant need, and a significant change that took place. So, underlying this need is this standard right here. This comes from a national set of standards. 1.4, analyzing how the dissatisfactions with the government under the Articles of Confederation were addressed with the writing of the Constitution of 1787, including the debates and compromises reached at that convention. Yeah, we can't even talk about that Philadelphia Convention until we get an understanding of what forced it to happen, what made the Philadelphia Convention even a reality. Because the Constitution was already in place. Why have a constitutional convention? Yeah, see? Needs. There were needs, and there were changes. So it all goes back to this time in our American history when the United States before there were states, there were colonies, right? And take a look at this image. This actually goes back to 1754. This was a Benjamin Franklin concept. If you look at this serpent, this join or die serpent, this comes back to the very first time that the colonies unified themselves for a common cause. 1754. We're going back before the American Revolution, okay? And so this image was published to convince the colonies that defeating the French was good for the colonies, was good for Mother Britain, and so on. Okay, and the reason why I bring this up is because this image is very different than the one that we see here, right? Oh yeah, our national seal, right? The very proud bald eagle. The olive branch in the one set of talons, and the arrows on another, signifying this balance between war and peace. And there, look at the breastplate on that eagle, right? The 13 very familiar stripes with that field of blue. No stars on that, interestingly enough, right? And e pluribus unum, right? The Latin phrase that means out of many, or of many, we are one. Yeah, this nice idea, this concept of unity. You know what? It's not the case, because after the American Revolution was over, even while we were still fighting the American Revolution, there was this Constitution that was written that guided its Congress, this somehow national body, guided this Congress how to function. And it didn't function very well, because the Articles of Confederation, this first plan of government, was weak. Right? There were 13 specific articles that would define the relationship amongst those 13 sovereign and independent states. And this first plan of government was Constitution 1.0. It was replaced by the Constitution in 1787. And so our goal with this part one of this video series is to understand why. So I go back to the document that ended the war, the Treaty of Paris. Right? Don't confuse this one with the Treaty of Paris that comes from that ended the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War. This is the Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolution. And look, right, the very first line of the Treaty of Paris says, "His Britannic Majesty acknowledges the said United States, vis-a-vis, namely," and he spells them out. He lists them, not he, right? He didn't write it, but he signs this document. He acknowledges, the document acknowledges the king's authority here. The king recognizes all the states, and I jump to the bottom, to be free, sovereign, and independent states. Notice he doesn't say, notice this document doesn't say, His Britannic Majesty recognizes these states to be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. No, it doesn't. Right? Let me jump to Article 2 of of the Articles of Confederation, right? Article 2 says each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by this confederation expressly delegated to the United States and Congress assembled. It acknowledges that each state is a country of its own, right? See, the way we use the word state is confusing here, right? The way these documents use the word state is the true definition, right? There are 4 defining characteristics of a state. One is that it has a population, a group of people. That's one. Living within a territory, right? The territory boundaries is the second one. That has a government to exercise, the government is the third one, to exercise its sovereignty, which is the fourth one, right? So those 4 things, sovereignty being the big key right there. So Article 2 of the Articles of Confederation, again, make it clear that each state is sovereign. Okay, and I'm going to talk about sovereignty in just a second. But it does acknowledge, though, that there is going to be a Congress that will be made up of delegates from all of the states to do some stuff, and we'll talk about what those are in just a minute too. Right? But the word sovereignty cannot be ignored here. Sovereignty is where ultimate power resides. Sovereignty is defined as the ability to govern and rule yourselves, right? To be and have authority over your domain. To be sovereign means that no one makes decisions for you. And under Great Britain, under British rule, right, sovereignty was in King George III. They fought a war to get rid of that. Once they finished that war, once the war was over, each state became sovereign. And so how do these individual countries work together on this North American continent was what the Articles of Confederation was supposed to define. How they're going to work together, how they're going to maintain a semblance of a unified and collective body, a group of states. Okay. And so the way they start this this document is they recognize some sort of federalism, and federalism is the relationship between a federal or a national or a central government and in a number of state governments. Federalism is a very unique idea in 1783, right? But federalism really defines 2 levels. Think levels upper and lower, right? The federal is upper. The federal government is in a way higher than an individual state, but the federal government, combined with all the states, is on an equal level. And so this diagram here shows how federalism exists today under our current Constitution, where the federal government is on equal footing with the state governments, plural, right? But in 1783, 1781, when the Articles of Confederation are created, the state governments have power over the federal government. There really is no federal government. Okay, the Congress isn't really a government. It's an assembly. Okay, it's a league of nations of sorts. It's a United Nations, right? So according to the Articles, the state governments give some powers to the federal government, like foreign relations. However, states like Massachusetts and New York would have some of their own foreign policies. And that's very difficult and complicated when we start sending ambassadors like John Adams to Great Britain to negotiate for the states. And he's like, how can I do this when my own states are doing their own thing? So really, what federalism is here isn't by nature federalism. It's not 2 levels. What the states wanted is to not be told what to do. So what is formed under the Articles of Confederation is what we call a confederacy, a confederation, a confederated system. It's a way of looking at how we are going to align ourselves and associate with each other, but still maintain that darling sovereignty. And that's a term that Washington is going to use in his letter to Henry Knox, written in 1787. So let's take a look at Article 3 of the Articles of Confederation. It says, the said states, right, all of us that agree to this document, the said states hereby severally enter into a firm league of friendship with each other for their common defense, the security of their liberties, and their mutual and general welfare, binding themselves to assist each other against attacks made upon them. So what is the purpose of the Articles of Confederation? What is the purpose of this firm league of friendship? Right? A military alliance. It was created so that the states could work together to defeat the British. And once they defeated the British, the intent was they would kind of go their separate ways. The Articles of Confederation allowed the states to do really whatever they wanted. But this firm league of friendship does break apart. It does fall apart. The states don't work together in their independence. They actually start working against each other. How is this possible? Well, let's take a look at what this Congress is supposed to do. If Congress is supposed to give some powers, if the Articles were supposed to give some powers to Congress, it certainly left some big ones out. Okay? Its basis was on equal representation. Each state got one vote when Congress assembled. And so, if Rhode Island sent 2 delegates to Congress, and Virginia, the biggest state, sent 20 delegates, Virginia still gets 1 vote. Rhode Island still gets 1 vote. They're equal, and that's how states and countries are viewed in the greater world, anyways. They're all equal. So, in order to pass a law, it had to have this supermajority. 9 of the 13 states would have to agree with that law to pass it. Extremely difficult to get that kind of a majority. What's even worse is if you wanted to change the Articles of Confederation, it took all 13. It took a unanimous vote to amend or change the Constitution. Right? And so what we say is even difficult or even impossible becomes even more impossible when we say, all right, so what if Congress does pass a law? Who's going to enforce that law? Who enforces laws today? Right? That job falls on the president. The president is the enforcer, the executive, the carrier-outer. Right? There was no presidency or federal court system under the Articles. It was just Congress. So these 2 major branches of our current government today came from the needs that were created by the deficiencies of the Articles of Confederation. So, moving forward, let's take a look at how the Articles took a look at some of these big principles, right? So, under the Articles, what do we have for federalism? Well, a firm league of friendship, right? It wasn't really a federal system at all. It's that the states allowed Congress to exist, and it didn't allow it to exist with much authority at all, right? Sovereignty rested on the states. Okay, representation of the states was truly equal. Taxation only came from the states. The Congress couldn't have any ability to tax the people individually. The powers of Congress, well, let's take a look at them. Foreign relations. Had an army and a navy. Declare war. They could have ambassadors. Right? Congress could send ambassadors overseas. They could negotiate treaties. But so could the states too. Okay. Legislation had to be passed by 2/3 of them. 9 of 13 is just a touch stronger than 2/3. It's not quite 3/4. And then if you wanted to amend or change these Articles of Confederation, change the Constitution, it took unanimous decisions. You know what the problem was? Rhode Island's going to vote no on everything, because Rhode Island is this state that believes they can do no wrong. And so as I wrap up this part 1, I end here with this idea, this concept of we need to compare the Articles with the Constitution as we go forward. These powers that Congress has is going to be terribly deficient. It's going to leave the states completely unable to work together. States are going to be able to tax other states in terms of import tariffs, and none of the states are going to have an ability to function and work together to settle huge major disputes. So as I go forward, part 2 is going to be successes and failures, or successes and problems. And then there's going to be likely a part 3 video here. So make sure that you kind of are following along and understanding that these Articles of Confederation, Constitution 1.0, had a very different set of goals in mind than Constitution 2.0. Constitution 1.0 was intended on unification for the purpose of getting rid of Great Britain. Once that happened, once that was done, the Articles had no point or no purpose, no goal in unifying these 13 separate states. Not at all. So something happens in these years following that makes it clear that we need a Constitution 2.0 with a very different set of goals. Thus endeth part 1.